In the dark, winding streets of 19th-century New York, a city teetering on the edge of chaos, one man loomed larger than life, a butcher by trade, but a predator by reputation. What many don't realize is that William "Bill the Butcher" Poole, the inspiration behind the infamous character from Gangs of New York, wasn't a creation of Hollywood imagination. He was terrifyingly real. Born in 1821 in New Jersey, William Poole was the epitome of physical intimidation. Standing over 6 feet tall and weighing more than 200 pounds, he was a towering figure, especially in an era when men were typically much smaller. In 1832, young William moved with his family to New York City, where he followed his father's footsteps into the butchering trade. But beneath the skilled hands of a meat cutter lurked a ferocious fighter who had come to embody the ruthless, unbridled violence of his time. Poole's hands weren't just adept with a butcher's blade. They were equally lethal in the brutal, lawless sport of bare-knuckle boxing. This wasn't the sanitized boxing we know today. There were no Queensberry rules to uphold decency in the ring. Matches were raw, bloody, and often fatal. Poole thrived in this savage arena, earning a reputation as a fighter who would stop at nothing to win. He gouged eyes, bit flesh, and crushed his opponents with sheer ferocity. But Poole's infamy wasn't confined to the boxing ring. He carried his brutal instincts onto the streets of New York, where knife fights were a grimly common occurrence. Armed with the tools of his trade, he carved out a reputation as a man who didn't just fight to survive, he fought to dominate. By the 1840s, Poole had cemented himself as a leader among New York's rough-and-tumble working-class men. Drawing on his connections in the boxing world and his standing in the butcher trade, he formed the Washington Street Gang, a precursor to the infamous Bowery Boys. Under his leadership, the Bowery Boys became more than just a street gang. They were an organized, ideologically driven group with a shared disdain for New York's growing immigrant population. In a city teeming with turmoil, firefighting crews were another battleground for dominance. Poole's gang often clashed with rival fire companies, turning blazing infernos into chaotic brawls. These firefights weren't just about pride, they were about profit. Fire crews were paid for each fire they extinguished, and territorial skirmishes between gangs often left fires raging unchecked while rival crews battled out. For Poole and his Bowery Boys, these fights were opportunities to solidify their grip on Manhattan streets. What truly set the Bowery Boys apart wasn't just their penchant for violence, but their staunch political ideology. They were fiercely nativist, aligned with the Know Nothing Party, a secretive pro-American anti-immigrant movement. Members of this organization sought to suppress the rights of immigrants, particularly the Irish Catholics who had fled the potato famine and were pouring into New York in search of a better life. Poole was no mere thug. He was a man on a mission. He used intimidation, violence, and political connections to disenfranchise Irish immigrants, barring them from voting and securing public office. At the core of his ideology was a belief that America belonged to native-born Protestants and that immigrants threatened the nation's very fabric. The Know Nothing Party earned its peculiar name from the members' refusal to acknowledge its existence. When questioned, they would simply reply, "I know nothing." But behind closed doors, they operated with ruthless efficiency. Their headquarters, known as the America's Club, became a fortress of anti-immigrant sentiment, and Poole was its enforcer, using his fists and knives to ensure the group's dominance. Opposing the Bowery Boys was the Irish Catholic gang known as the Dead Rabbits, led by none other than John Morrissey, a bare-knuckle boxer who would become Poole's most bitter rival. Morrissey's rise began with an audacious act of defiance, storming into the America's Club and brazenly challenging every man in the building to a fight. Armed to the teeth, the Bowery Boys didn't take kindly to this display of insolence. Morrissey endured a savage beating at their hands, but his bravery didn't go unnoticed. Tammany Hall, the pro-Irish Democratic Party machine, saw in him a loyal and ferocious ally. They took Morrissey under their wing, grooming him as an enforcer to protect their voters from the relentless intimidation tactics of the Bowery Boys. The rivalry between Poole and Morrissey would soon escalate into a full-blown war that spilled into the streets. Over 200 violent skirmishes were waged between the Bowery Boys and the Dead Rabbits, with Manhattan as their battleground. These clashes weren't mere gang fights. They were ideological wars fought with fists, knives, and an unrelenting thirst for dominance. William Poole wasn't just a butcher by trade. He was a butcher of men and ideals, carving out his vision of America with blood and violence. His story, though steeped in brutality, is a chilling glimpse into a time when the streets of New York were ruled not by laws, but by men like him, men who fought to define what it meant to be American. As tensions boiled over in the volatile streets of New York in 1855, the rivalry between William, Bill the Butcher Poole, and the Dead Rabbits reached a breaking point. It was a feud that transcended mere gang clashes. This was a battle for power, dominance, and ideology, fought with fists, knives, and guns. The spark that ignited the final inferno came during a bar fight that saw high-ranking members from both factions face off. Tom Hyer, a bare-knuckle prizefighter and staunch ally of Poole and the Bowery Boys, became a target for Dead Rabbits Lou Baker and Jim Turner. Shots rang out, and Hyer took a bullet to the neck, a flesh wound that could have easily been fatal. Despite his injury, Hyer retaliated with the ferocity of a seasoned fighter. Instead of firing his gun, which he reportedly missed with or chose not to use, he resorted to his fists, knocking both men senseless and dragging them out into the street like discarded refuse. Poole, always quick to defend his allies and assert his dominance, sought Baker out just days later. When he found him, Poole delivered a merciless beating that left Baker unconscious and bloodied, a grim reminder of what it meant to cross the Bowery Boys. This incident set the stage for the most infamous showdown in Poole's life. William Poole threw down a gauntlet, challenging his sworn enemy, Dead Rabbits leader John Morrissey, to a fight. The duel was set to take place at the Amos Street dock, an area that had seen its fair share of violence. Accounts of what transpired that day vary wildly, but what remains consistent is that this was no ordinary fight. It was a brutal, no-holds-barred brawl where survival outweighed honor. Some reports claim that Poole defeated Morrissey with startling efficiency, besting the former world champion in under a minute. A riot erupted immediately afterward, with the Bowery Boys unleashing their fury on Morrissey's Irish entourage, leaving them battered and humiliated. Other accounts suggest that Poole himself orchestrated an ambush, summoning 200 of his supporters to overwhelm Morrissey and his small group of allies. Whichever version is true, one fact is indisputable. Morrissey left that day beaten and thirsting for revenge. That revenge came on a cold February night in 1855. Morrissey, accompanied by his Dead Rabbit cohorts, confronted Poole at Stanwix Hall, a popular bar on Broadway. The confrontation was anything but subtle. Morrissey spat in Poole's face and attempted to gun him down on the spot. But fate had other plans. Morrissey's pistol jammed, leaving him defenseless and staring down the barrel of Poole's gun. It could have ended there, with Poole claiming victory in the most decisive way possible. Instead, the butcher's twisted sense of honor came into play. Declaring it cowardly to kill an unarmed man, Poole tossed Morrissey a knife, challenging him to fight on equal terms. But Morrissey, knowing all too well the reputation Poole had earned with a blade, refused. The standoff ended only when the police intervened, separating the two men and sending them their separate ways. But the night was far from over. Poole returned to the bar around midnight, unaware that Morrissey's allies were plotting their revenge. Baker, alongside several Dead Rabbits, stormed into Stanwix Hall. Among them was a man known as Noseless McLaughlin, whose disfigurement only added to the aura of menace surrounding the group. Tensions flared when McLaughlin spat in Poole's face, escalating the confrontation to its inevitable violent conclusion. Poole, ever the provocateur, bet 5 gold coins that he could defeat any man among the Tammany Hall loyalists. What happened next descended into chaos. Turner, one of the pro-immigrant faction, drew his pistol but clumsily shot himself in the arm. As he fell, he fired again, this time hitting Poole in the leg. With Poole wounded and on the floor, Baker seized his chance. In an act of cold-blooded vengeance, he fired multiple shots into Poole's chest and stomach. The butcher of the Bowery lay bleeding on the floor, his towering frame reduced to a crumpled, mortal shell. Despite his catastrophic injuries, William Poole defied the odds, clinging to life for an astonishing 14 days. Those who visited him in his final moments described a man unrepentant, resolute in his beliefs, and unwavering in his sense of identity. As death loomed, Poole reportedly placed the blame for the ambush squarely on Morrissey. His final words, spoken with defiance and pride, would become a part of New York folklore. "Goodbye, boys. I die a true American. Thank God I die a true American." On the day of his funeral, over 5,000 mourners lined the streets to pay their respects. It was one of the largest processions the city had ever seen, a testament to the impact William Poole had on the volatile world of 19th century New York. William Poole was a man of contradictions, a butcher who wielded his knives as weapons, a fighter who lived by his own brutal code, and a nativist who saw himself as the last defense against the tide of immigration reshaping his city. His death marked the end of an era, but his legend endured, immortalized in stories, headlines, and eventually Hollywood films. The streets he fought for, the gangs he led, and the battles he waged became part of the tapestry of New York's history. But beyond the blood and violence, Poole's story is a reflection of a nation grappling with its identity, a nation divided by race, religion, and politics, searching for a sense of unity in the chaos. The story of William Poole forces us to confront the darker side of the American dream. It's a reminder of how easily fear and prejudice can fuel division and violence. But it's also a cautionary tale about the power of resilience, identity, and enduring human need to fight for what we believe in, however flawed those beliefs may be. As you reflect on this tale of bloodshed and ambition, consider this. What does it mean to be a true American? And at what cost do we defend that definition? If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to help us uncover more forgotten tales from history. Join us next time as we explore the lives of those who shaped, and often shattered, the world we know today.